Welcome to Memory Lanes, the housing industry podcast by the Oracle Group and Define Creative. This podcast features guests from the sector talking about the most memorable homes they've lived in.
It's a chance to get to know the person behind the LinkedIn profile. Well, Gerry, Andy, thank you so much for joining us on Memory Lanes. So excited to have you here today.
Lovely to be here, Harriet.
Great
Thank you
stuff.
for the invite.
You're very, very welcome. I know there's going to be so much we're going to be discussing, but perhaps we should start off with, for those that don't know you, who you are and, the jobs that you're in.
And how you got there,
How you got there.
yeah.
Would you like to start?
No, you go.
See, this is the
How
way it's going
polite.
to. This is the way it's going to be. Yes, yeah. Honestly, it doesn't work like.
Just give me enough time to fit in after you've finished.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. So shall I kick off?
Go for it.
Obviously, from the accent, you're well aware that I'm Irish. Some people think I'm Scottish, but honestly, I'm not. I'm from Southern Ireland, a little place called Quebec. Brought up in a small terrace council house. Went to school locally. Was taught by the nuns, which certainly has taught me a lot over the years. I can assure you. Started my first job after going to college, and which was in construction. I was there for 7 years, and then decided to move to the UK. Moved to the UK in 1987. Worked for a company called Lang Homes as their first regional accountant.
And so what does Rejuvina8 do? Just give us the background of that.
Rejuvina8 is a property consultancy business. So, and it was originally just me. And I didn't want to recruit any staff. I realized in being a managing director for about 10 years that in the end I was spending 2.5 days a week on personnel issues rather than running a business. So when I set up my own business, I decided it was just something that I wanted to do for myself. And so I work and still do work with a number of housing associations doing various project work. And then as an introduction to Andy, then 5 years ago, Andy decided that he wanted to retire, and because we knew each other from our past, I thought, no, this is not for him. He's too good at what he does.
Keep him working.
And we've got to keep him working. And I had experience not just as a friend, but as a work colleague.
How long have you known each other for?
I think, Andy, we first met in 1989.
Yeah.
I think.
I would say best part of 30, 35 years.
Is it rumours of a football pitch? Is that where you met?
We met in the local pub, funnily enough, after a
there's a
strenuous night
surprise.
of football training. And there was a friend of mine who worked at Lang Homes, Pete Lee, and he said, I've got a friend this chap's just joined at Southampton, I think. And Gerry came along and sort of the rest is history. And, we just hit it off. And although our paths weren't as interlinked as they are now, but we've been good friends. I think I went to one of your weddings, didn't I? I can't quite remember.
How many have there been?
Yeah, I couldn't remember which one, but I'm sure I was there at a couple of them. But no, we've been, the greatest accolade I can pay Gerry, before I introduce myself, is that I have two brothers, and if I had to have a third, it would be him. And it's not because of what he does.
Isn't that lovely?
And that's the truth. And when you get to the age that I am now, the truth is that you value those friendships immensely. And as I said, we have experienced lots of things along the way, and I'm absolutely honoured and humbled to be able to help him with Rejuvina8 and doing what I do, because I don't know, people sometimes do or don't believe in fate. I believe in fate and the sliding doors situation, if I'm really honest. And I sit here and think to myself, well, we're here because of housing. I didn't know anything to do with housing 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah, that's not your background, is
No,
it?
nothing at all. So maybe it'd be appropriate to say that, as I said, Andy McDonald. I've had 3 jobs since I left full-time education, which was a very, very long time ago. It's a typical baby boomer background. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I did a bit of invigilating for a while and everything else. And Gerry said, look, I'm looking to open up the offering of what Rejuvina8 do. Do you want to come and work with me? Here I am, sitting in front of this camera talking to you. It's been great. And from my point of view, I was born, as I said, in the mid-50s. I have 2 brothers. I was born into a council estate environment, which was very loving, very community-based. I have very fond memories of my childhood. And I've only lived in 6 homes all my life. So from my point of view, I've got more involved now with housing associations, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I know more than I did. And I find it really, really interesting. And my job now is that I do the coaching for Gerry's company, Rejuvina8, with a number of housing associations. I did with some of the local authorities as well. We have about 30, 35 people that I coach once a month for about an hour and a half. And it's all around leadership and everything else. I make the point, I'm no therapist, I'm no trained therapist, and I don't want to be. But I think people have the ability to do so much more if they just had a little bit more belief and faith in themselves.
So I think we've had this conversation before. There's a real difference, isn't there, between coaching, mentorship, and as you said as well, counselling. There's very defined lines kind of between them. So if you explain a little bit about what you guys do, and then we can.
The mentoring piece is that if you're working in the housing environment, if I can use that term, or building environment, and you went to Gerry and said, Gerry, I've got this situation, what do you think? He'd be able to give some advice because of his knowledge and expertise. Well, I know nothing.
Yeah.
Manuel.
You couldn't ask me for any advice because I couldn't give it. But when it comes to people and opening up their potential, and that's the thing I learned for the last 10 years of my career in Manpower, where they were trying to change the philosophy of how recruitment branch managers move to more leadership-based, people-orientated based, rather than targets and task management, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And I think in terms of coaching, I have a very simple dictate for coaching: helping people help themselves. That's what coaching is. And asking questions to make sure that they're happy with what they are thinking of doing or going to do, and whether that's in their job or in their career development or whatever. So coaching is something that I can do, and I talk to people at all levels in these housing associations, some directors, some the newest, youngest people in. I talk to human beings. I know it sounds a little bit crass to say, but they're human at the end of the day. They have frailties and everything else like everybody else. And it's great that we can give the confidence from their point of view to help them make the right decisions for their careers and for what they're doing in their current day jobs.
One of the reasons that we wanted to do the coaching, I certainly want going to speak to Andy about it, was the fact that nowadays in sport, there's nobody that doesn't have a coach.
Yeah.
Everybody, if you look at somebody like Andy Murray, I think he's probably got about 20 of them in terms of dietitians and everything else, but there's people helping. Golfers are the same. But yet we employ people and spend loads of money on them, and at the worst don't even give them a one-to-one in terms of a regular communication, and they get no coaching. And we've just found that it's worked really well. As I say, Andy is doing 30 plus a month now, so there's an awful lot, and it's grown, and it actually grew through COVID as well. We were coaching people who hadn't even met their colleagues physically.
Oh, wow, of course,
so all of that was going on. And it's just a really important part. And out of, I think in 5 years, Andy, out of 64 people, we've now had 29 promotions. So that tells you that it does work. Yeah. He's actually very good. Yeah, he's actually very good.
I think modest is quite a good word.
Well, yes. I would just say, and maybe that's just in terms of my experience. There are people who can have a very high opinion of themselves. There can have people who obviously lack in self-confidence greatly. I know I'm effective in my role, but I really sincerely am as good as the people on the other side of the screen, or when I can do it face to face. And there are some people that come on the coaching program because they've been nominated by a senior manager, and the last thing they want to do is to be coached.
You're going to want to be there.
Absolutely. I have no issue with scepticism, even some cynicism.
I'm sold.
Open-mindedness. And the truth is, you have to set the scene. And I think one of the things that stands me in good stead now, if I'm really honest, is that when I worked in Manpower, maybe it was to do with my background and culture and everything else. I put people on pedestals. So senior managers, directors, I got on with them, but I was very, very respectful of where they were. No, I don't. And maybe that is, and it really helps me help the people that I'm working with. So I don't have any issue whether they're heads of, directors, or whatever. As I said, they're human beings at the end of the day, and they have frailties the same as everybody else.
So I think when we're thinking of the qualities of leadership and how you've learned this over the years. Talk us through then sort of where this came from. Should we dive into?
Well, I think maybe, thinking about the places that you've lived in, how they've influenced where you are right now, how they've shaped your lives. I know, you can go right back to the beginning. We normally say to guests, bring one property that you've lived in, one home, and talk about that. But it might be better with you two to talk about just how your different homes have shaped you, and maybe if there's one or two significant ones along that journey.
Well, I think it's a really good question. It's very hard to pick one, because I think there's so much that I have learned from different ones and carry on, and picking up the memories that come with each one. Starting out, the family home was a terraced council house in Kilbeggan. I'm 10 years younger so I've got two brothers and a sister, but I'm 10 years younger than my next. So I don't actually remember a whole lot about my brothers and sisters, my eldest brother and sister, because they were all somewhat being educated at that stage, because there's 15 years and 19 years between us.
Oh, wow,
and 10 years with me and my next brother. And because of that, I remember a lot of my youth just being me and my mum and dad, and my brothers, my siblings, visiting from where they live. Because you've got to remember, in Ireland in those days, to actually advance, you had to go work elsewhere. You weren't going to be working in the local town. So you had to go to Dublin or go to Galway or wherever. And you had to go to one of the cities really to try and further your career. And all the universities and colleges were all going to be in those cities. So they weren't around that often when I was growing up. There was a quite funny story. Both of us have been very heavily involved in sport. I'm a sporting fanatic. But there was, in our town, there was a green where everybody used to play football. But it is a true story that my brother, on one of his trips down, and he was very good at, my next brother, 10 years older, was very good at looking after me. But on one of the trips, he took me up in a pram while he was playing football, and ended up coming home and left me up in the field. And my mum seemingly went berserk and said, "Where's Gerry?" And oh my God, and he had to race back up and pick me up. So I can't even remember but I was very young. So in being brought up in that home, it was just full of love, full of. It's funny how, as we move on and we're moving into the world we move into, I find myself as I get older still going back to, the fact that we had a garden where you actually got all your vegetables from. Your potatoes, your carrots, your lettuce, and everything came from just outside rather than having to go and get them elsewhere. My parents were, my mum was a stay-at-home mum. My dad worked in a place called Borden-on-Mona, which was about 10 miles up the road, a bog, which is very familiar in Southern Ireland. And he worked very, very hard. They gave up most of their earnings, probably 80% of their earnings, just to make sure that my two brothers and myself and my sister got the education that they felt that they couldn't have.
And did you know that at the time, that that's what was happening, or have you only found that?
No. I knew it as I got older.
Yeah.
Because I was still I didn't move to the UK, I think, until I was sort of 26, 27. So obviously, and pretty much was at home for all of those years up to then. So you get to know. So a lot of the things, if somebody said to me, who's the person that's influenced you most in life, I would say it was my father, because he was just such a hard worker.
And he sacrificed a lot.
And he sacrificed hugely for us just so we could have an education. And in fact, I remember one day where I'd had some really good results in my intercert, and I decided to my mum that I didn't want to go to school anymore because I hated it and didn't like the nuns. And I told her that I wanted to go and do what my dad did. And unfortunately, my mum told him, and he said to me, "Over my dead body, will you be coming to do what I did? I have not given up what I've given up so that you could work this hard. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to get an education and you're going to do us proud." And I'd like to think if he's looking down, that's exactly what's going on. But so great family, great home, key in the door, people always coming in and out. And if I'm being really honest with you, in leaving in leaving, and as I got older, in leaving Kilbeggan, part of that, there was other reasons, but part of that was also that I thought I realised that it wasn't hectic enough for me, and that I didn't like everybody knowing everything about everybody. So there was trying to find the balance between everybody knowing everything about you and being in your life and having some privacy. And I guess ever since I've left Ireland, I've carried that on. So even though I live now in Leon Solent on the south coast, I can go down to shops, restaurants, whatever it be, and they'll all know me, but they don't really know me. They don't really know what I do, and they don't know everything. And we don't have the key in the door at home, but everybody's very welcome to come to the house, but it's not like it was in those days. So I think there was part of me that was probably different, and I found that in coming to the UK, that I enjoyed the hustle and bustle. I loved coming to London and finding the hustle and bustle, and most often people would not. And a lot of the people that were in my final year in class at school, a lot of them still live back in Kilbeggan.
Have you ever had any desire to go and live back there?
Well, interestingly enough, myself and my wife are going back next week, funny enough, but the last time we were back, which was about this time last year, I think, we rented a car, and I drove down into the square, and there was just nobody there, and we had to pull up because we had to go onto the main street. And I stopped the car and I said, "Could you ever see me coming back here?" And she said, "Not in your life." And the only thing I thought that day, which was sad, the only thing I thought was missing was tumbleweed running down the centre of the town, because there was just nobody there. It was a bleak day, it was a grey day, it was raining, just nothing about it was.
But yet you have all these warm memories.
But yes, and I have, so and they're never going to go away, and nor should they, I think, you know. And then I moved to the UK. I was working for Lang, as I said earlier, and then I was posted down on the south coast, but I had nowhere to live. And the MD at the time, a guy called John Goodwin, said to me, "Well, we'll have to get you somewhere. You got to live somewhere." So he said, "We've got this show area over at Totton where we've got a number of apartments and a number of houses, but he says we've got a spare one there." He says, "Let me speak to the sales and marketing director. We'll get some furniture for you, and you can stay there until you find a place."
So you stayed in a show home in Tottenham?
So I stayed at a show home in Totton down down near Southampton.
Right,
because I was working down there, and so that was my starting career. And basically he helped me get on the ladder, even though I wasn't paying for anything, as it turns out, other than he obviously being part of his business. And then I was coming down to stay with a friend of mine who was working for the same business as me down in Southampton. And he put me up in his place for about a week or so. And I said, "I need to get out, I need to be on my own." And I found a bedsit in Castle Street in Southsea. And it was a little bedsit. I was sharing a bathroom with another gentleman, and single bed, little kitchenette area. I don't think it was a black and white TV, but it was a TV anyway that I had, which I think I got for £30 somewhere. And that evening when I came down to the south coast, that was actually all I had in my pocket was £30. And my friend loaned me 6 weeks' rent so that I could get this bedsit. Now, I did have a job because I was working for Lang, so I was going to, I knew I was going to be paying him back, but at the time I had nothing, so I couldn't, and I wanted to get out on my own.
That sounds terrifying. Do you remember how you felt? Were you scared, or were you just not really thinking about?
No, I don't think I was scared, because I'd done the whole thing of coming from Ireland to England, and I was with friends, and Andy and some other friends of his were becoming part of my life. So I didn't have anybody at all. It was just that something hadn't worked out. It's important, and I needed to find myself and figure out, well, why was that so bad? And so I stayed in this bedsit, and I thought it was a great thing, because I always tell this story. It was the wallpaper was falling off the wall. Whatever way it was put up, it was sort of half and half, and it would come over. And I thought, I really should pull that off the wall and just have it and just literally pull it. And over the period of time I was there, it just seemed to keep coming over. At one stage, I thought it was just going to be my bedspread. You know what I mean? And I decided, the more it came over, the more I decided, I'm leaving you here. I want to remember you. And I say to my wife now, Rhonda, that, you know, if things have worked out very well for us, touch wood, but if they hadn't, I really believe from the strength of character that came with that period of time I was there, that I could survive, and that it wouldn't affect me mentally, that I couldn't survive. And I think that's really important.
So when things get a bit tough now, you might take yourself back to that home that you lived in to remind yourself that actually.
I would, because it's hugely vivid. It's hugely vivid, and probably more so vivid than my childhood. And that's not because there was anything wrong with my childhood, because it was full of love. But I think I was a grown person. I wasn't that young. I should have known better, and it was time to grow up. And it's really interesting because between Rhonda and myself, we now have, Rhonda's got 3 boys, and I've got a boy and a girl, and they're between 29 and 33, so they're all around the same age. And it was around 28 when I was. And when they're thinking, oh, I really needed this job for that, and you know what, I don't have any money, I say, you've got to remember that at 28, I had £30, and now look. So you've still got plenty of time in your life to achieve stuff, yeah? There's still a lot ahead, and I'm a great believer in roads where you come to T-junctions, and you've got a choice between left and right. And it's important that if you take left and it's wrong, make sure you change again and go back. Yeah, so take the next turning and keep taking turnings until you find the right course.
And it's just about learning from our mistakes, isn't it?
Yes,
and
it is.
Actually, when you make a mistake, it's not always a bad thing, because actually you're going to learn from it, and you're going to move on, and it's going to take you on a different path.
Exactly that.
I do think the learning from mistakes.
Oh, are you going to talk about that when you owned a property for 6 weeks?
Yes.
Come on, let's get into that.
Well, I know, just it's just interesting, because the more I think about it, I've had 6 homes in all of my life. And they have more. The more I think about it, the more they have defined my life. Because I was born in a council house, which I was very proud of, but it was surrounded by private dwellings as well. This is the 50s. And I never, not suggesting I would have done, but I never felt that there was them and us going on or anything like that. Just a happy community.
Yeah.
And then we moved to a council estate where everybody was in what today would be called social housing. And it was great. I had a lovely upbringing. My mum followed exactly the same route as Gerry. She was Irish, came from County Kilkenny, came over to the UK, etc. So it's made me realise again in terms of, the thing was, again, it was during the war. So they come over, and I remember them living in Chelsea. And I'm thinking, imagine trying to rent somewhere in Chelsea in 2024. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah. But nevertheless, and I'm mindful of those 2 experiences, because there were lots and lots of happy childhood memories. I had nothing but positive images of that. And I came from a working class family where my dad went out to work, my mum stayed at home and looked after the house and looked after bringing up me and my brothers and everything else, and it was brilliant. And I think from my point of view, what really, really defined me was that I was living at home as well. I was probably past 30 now, and I was having a good time.
Still living at home at 30, having your washing done, your meals
cooked. Have you noticed the connection? I was living at home to my mid-20s as well.
I was
great mums.
And also my daughter now, my eldest daughter, is in the same situation. She's still living. We've got another daughter who's got a rented property down in Bristol. But she's now in the same situation. She's turning 30 next February, wants to have her independence.
Yeah, of course.
I did it for the wrong reason. Talk about mistakes. I'd been going out with this girl for the summer of 1982. You can look it up, rah-rah dresses, the whole thing of that era. And she said, she'd been married, and she said to me, would you like to live with me? And I'm like, oh, I've only been going about 4 or 5 months. I'm thinking, I need to get out.
You need to get out.
30 nearly, I need to leave mum.
But in those days, would you not have moved out by yourself? It sounds like you almost needed
my brothers left because they went to university. I was at home having my washing done, playing keep, but not much, and I was having a good time. Yeah. And I got on with my mum and dad great. I never disrespected.
So you never thought, oh, I need to. What about like coming home late at night and no restrictions?
Perhaps I just got lucky.
Actually, you mentioned the box room that you had when you spoke earlier, and how happy you were when you shut that door.
Absolutely. I long story short, I went with her. We bought a property for £22,000 down near where Gerry lives on the coast at the Solent, and £3,000 wasn't it's not much now in housing terms, but it was a lot of money to put down on a deposit for them. And I bought and sold it in 6 weeks because I was so unhappy there. And I signed the house over to my then or ex-girlfriend, and I'm glad to say her family took it on and everything else. And I said, "You're right, Alice." I went back to my mum and dad. I remember my dad dropping the newspaper when I walked back in. I was really embarrassed. You can imagine.
So you went back. Oh,
I went back to
I know this story.
I've gone for 6 weeks, and I spent most of the time when I was coming back from work stopping off for a cup of tea and the odd meal and everything else. And it sounds awful about this lady that I was living with. She was a lovely person. We just weren't meant for each other.
Yeah.
You don't know someone until you live with them.
Of course.
And the truth is the fact that I'm very risk averse, but I took a massive decision, signed it over to her, never regretted it. And going back to my mum's that night, I remember I was really embarrassed. And my dad was a man of few words, like Gerry's father. And I won't use the terminology that he used, but he said that you've been a bit of a, haven't you? And I said, yes, I have. And he never said a word afterwards because I knew he was happy to have me back home. Just as I understand what it's like with my daughter Ellen now. She's got her own life, she wants her independence. But when I put my back against that bedroom box door, it was fantastic.
I'm back.
Feelings of freedom and everything else.
What age were you when you left eventually?
Again, because my now wife, Fiona, had just bought a property in Fareham. And it's weird, I met her at Christmas, and then by the end of January, I'd only known her a few weeks, and I was living with her. And it's the weirdest thing. And then we bought another property, and the one property that my heart, I think, is with, is the only property I ever bought that was from new. We saw it being built, Bellway Home.
Okay.
And I was really intrigued with Bellway Home because I really enjoyed them because the bloke who was building it for us used to be a professional footballer for Southampton, and he played in one of the cup finals. So I used to get on great with him. And so I don't know whether my view of Bellway was tainted by knowing him, but he did a good job. But that's where my daughters came back to. And I reflect that when you bring your first child back, and we came out of the maternity home, and my wife, and there I am with a little carry cot type thing, and she has to go upstairs and have a sleep. She's exhausted, of course, and everything else. And it's the realisation in your life. And
baby to keep alive.
I put Ellen, my daughter, who was about 2 seconds old, on the coffee table. And I just looked at it, and you think the whole of your life has changed.
Oh, completely.
And I'm thinking,
no going back.
I'm responsible for this person. So St Thomas Close, where I lived in Fareham, and that coffee table and that moment was another big factor.
So vivid.
A big defining moment
A really
for you.
massive.
I think that's what
where
makes
my
it,
heart lies. Yes.
I think that's what makes it so hard. Like you were saying earlier, that you've asked people about one home, but there's everything. There's the ones I've told you about. There's the home which we haven't talked about and won't be talking about, where my kids were brought up. I'm now living with my current wife, and we've got 4 grandchildren that are very much part of that. And then there's obviously the other place that you keep rabbiting on about in
dropping hints here.
In Spain.
across the road, across the water. So there's so much.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting about the Spanish one is, if you said to me, what is bearing in mind, I've been in-house building all my life, what is the best purchase you ever made? I would say it was the Spanish one.
And why is that?
Just because it's at the time of life that I'm at now, and myself and Rhonda, that it just gives us, and we've got the grandchildren coming through, it's been able to create what I think is really important to everybody, going back to the link with work and coaching, is having that work-life balance.
Yeah.
Which I think is so interesting, considering your careers and how hard you've worked, that you've now got to this point where you really appreciate the work-life
Hugely.
balance. What do you think gave you that kind of idea that, hey, maybe we do need to evaluate life a little bit? Or
I can tell you the reason why, Harriet, because Gerry at 63 runs his life in the fast lane.
Yeah.
And he's like, someone classified him in the nicest of ways, a Tasmanian devil. He's sponsored by Duracell. And I've never known a bloke work so. I said to him, I think he's got 6 or 7 projects that he's got going. You know, this is better than me.
Yeah.
And but the weird thing is, I can't classify him as a workaholic because he's not. But I think the one thing is, when at least he goes out to Spain, as I understand it, he might have 1 or 2 spaces of time in a week or whatever where he'll do work, but at least he can actually put his feet up and enjoy himself for his work-life balance. Because when he comes back to the UK, it tires me hearing what he does. It really does.
So that sounds like it's a place for your grandchildren as well.
Yeah, very much so.
Maybe one day when they're asked about the homes they've lived in or the homes they've experienced, they might talk about their memories
hugely.
being away with you there.
Yeah, and that is really appropriate that you say this now, because this year is the first year where all our own children have been out and all of our grandchildren have been out this year,
special.
which is really special. So that's the first time that's ever happened.
So just thinking about all the places you've lived and how they've impacted you, could you both describe, just to end the interview off, home in 3 words to us?
Oh, 3 words. Memories, love, and security. But I don't mean financial security, I mean security emotional security.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's not. I would say, from my experiences, especially when you're a parent now, and I think back to my childhood and how happy I was. So I would say memories as well for that reason.
Yeah.
The love of my family and my friends, but certainly the love of my family now and the family, my mum and dad and my brothers, brings back very fond memories as well, I think, and the warmth around it. As I said to you earlier on, I had a really happy childhood, and I'm thankful we all have our ups and downs, but I have a happy life, and a lot of that is down to the people that I live with.
He couldn't even come up with his own 3.
You're just that entwined,
Honestly.
aren't you? But I think it's so interesting when you're talking about sort of your beginnings and where you are now and who you're working with. The fact that you've both had such humble, loving family homes.
Yes.
You really do appreciate, like you were saying.
And it does set your footprint, I think. It really
your
does set
foundation,
it's your
wasn't it?
foundation. It sets your foundation.
I think the thing about the coaching now and everything else, I think it's like you treat people with respect, don't you? And you talk to people with respect and everything else. And I think I've reflected that my childhood, the way I've been brought up, being respectful and everything else, and I'd like to think I'm a people-orientated person. I don't think you could do what I do if you weren't. But the truth of the matter is, I think that little bit of humility doesn't go amiss. There are lots of people who think they're the finished article. I don't believe.
And you learnt that in your first home.
I did.
Yes, he did.
Thank you so much for
you.
coming
you're
to
very
see us
welcome.
and sharing all that with us. It's been really enjoyable.
Thank you very much for the invite.
Yes, we've
Great.
really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Memory Lanes.
This podcast is brought to you by the Oracle Group and Define Creative.